Let's do this.
The protest just begun to some. Slavery was from before. 100 years of generational damage done by a race we couldn't run. In a race we couldn't win. With the world's fastest men and laws based on skin. It's called racism. It's called racism. Protest, protest. It's called racism. Now people misconstrue thinking racism and prejudice is the same. Prejudice is like a stereotype, something we all do, an emotion that we feel that's irrational, not true. Racism's like believing white skin's the superior type, socially justified based on inferior hype. Don't believe me? Research recessive genes, then you'll know what I mean. We're the real kings and queens raised up from the dirt as the first who gave birth to all the people on earth. So you're all black genetically, whether you're white, red, yellow, or green, and everything in between. It's a fact that every race ancestors was black. That's what I mean, every race ancestors was black. The protest just begun to some. Slavery was from before. 100 years of generational damage done by a race we couldn't run. In a race we couldn't win. With the world's fastest men and laws based on skin. It's called racism. It's called racism. Protest, protest. It's called racism. It's called racism. It's called racism. Protest, protest. It's called racism. Racism is an oppressive prejudice system designed with the division to subjugate a people to the will of privileged decision. To discriminate with laws and ideologies to keep them uplifted. In the case of America, 400 years of slave labor was gifted to build the country as economics was generationally passed down. But the freed slaves had nothing and was left to economically and educationally drown. Not allowed to read books or educate themselves. A symbolic boot on the neck, they still uplifted themselves by themselves through the fire. They literally walked through hell. That's why we say white devils, cause they tried to keep us in hell. Plus, any person of God would have treated us well. That's why we rise above the hidden lies, cause truth prevails. We came from Kemet, made of burnt brass, and we're haired like wool. So you can't pull the wool over our eyes by lies taught at school, where history was rewritten to teach racism is taught to trick both blacks and whites to keep division. Historically, it was a greedy business decision to create the nation and justify the slave plantation with systematic humiliation and human degradation through lies and racist miseducation with teachings of hate. Examples of brainwashing. Thousands of whites would bring knives to a lynching to cut slave body parts from memorabilia like skin, toes, fingers, parts of the heart, scalp bones, and genitalia. And then they gathered around a dead body so they could get a picture of the brat of their families that they hung out at a lynch. While pregnant women, slaves' stomachs cut open wide while tied to a tree. Then they stomped on the baby so the mother eyes could see. This was normal behavior for racist whites since 1683. So ask yourself, would you do that now? If no, slavery only ended 155 years ago. So your great-grandparents were living so they would know. Plus the laws of Jim Crow were 55 years ago. Ask your parents who were 75 cause they would know. And it might have been them and you just did not know. They'll say they were just following orders, were taught to do it. Instead of saying no, many would just go out and do it. While Black Wall Street was bombed down to the ground by airplanes cause of hate. Genocide against blacks in every state. So tell me, how can racist whites hate blacks when based on facts, all that hate should come from blacks? But ironically, we don't hate whites, we just fight for the right to grow free. So ask if the apple don't fall from the tree. How do you know the racist seed's not inside of me? solution is for blacks to unite, cause our gray areas are causing damage and internal fights. Some blacks wanna be white, detached from the black plight, and black intellectuals institutionally thinking they're right. Everything that you were taught is subject to lies because it's embedded in the school's curriculum, based on the same greedy business decision used to keep racism alive. With tools of divide, black versus white, Republican versus Democrat, and left versus right. It's just another divide, breaking us down into subgroups that fight, and it's left right in front of our eyes. This allows other people to change the story. So all blacks are different with different points of views, but your blackness is the one thing that's the same from a systemic racism point of view, and the laws and education was codified specifically against you. We know the spirit inside doesn't have a color, just our skin. But as long as there is physical inequality, we must fight until we win. And a win is when the world no longer looks at the color of one's skin. So study what I call self-esteem. Study yourself, entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, economics, and mathematics. Learn discipline, teach each other, and the key is to create great habits. It's Big Lord, one love, peace. The protest just begun to some. Slavery was from before. 100 years of generational damage done by a race we couldn't run. In a race we couldn't win. With the world's fastest men and laws based on skin. It's called racism. It's called racism. Protest, protest. It's called racism. It's called racism. It's called racism. Protest, protest. It's called racism. It's Godier, the comic book about Cranus and Abel. Take a look at bignard007.com.